Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Awesome Day of FileMaker Training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTrain.tv, where every day it's a fantastic day to learn about the Claris FileMaker platform. This week is all about FileMaker Server and AWS. We are not going to touch on Mac installation, not because we don't love Macs. I personally love Mac. But we're going to be focused on AWS and then Linux and Windows installs. And then somewhere on the back end of everything, at some point, we're going to shoot a Mac install just so we have it, a new one. We did all this about 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, Jacob and I did. There was a whole week thing. And so we're just redoing what we did a couple of years ago, but with fresh material. And so with that in mind, Monday through Friday this week is going to be awesome. Mr. Taylor set the time aside. He is really great at this, and he's good at communicating. So I'm looking forward to this. Now, as a reminder, this live stream is it might be free for you, but I'm Richard Carlton. It's not free for me. I get a bill for this, and I greatly appreciate it. One of you, or every one of you, not just one of you, everyone, do me a favor. If you don't have a training subscription, get a training subscription. Even if you think that you're the smartest person in the world in FileMaker, support the channel. Jacob Taylor's here. I'm about to turn him loose with the keys to the car and the steering wheel and everything. But before we do that, so today, and Jacob can jump in here. Today is kind of like overview conversation day, big picture stuff, okay? Tomorrow is going to be essentially building an AWS Windows server and a Linux server, and that will maybe slide into Wednesday a little bit. We're not sure, but we're going to build out two EC2. Those are virtual servers. We're going to talk all about this today. We're going to build them out probably. I don't know if we even start today, but for sure we'll be doing it tomorrow. After we build the virtual servers, we can log on to. Then we are going to do the installation on FileMaker Server on those machines. So when we're done, you have a functional FileMaker Server on Mac, or correction, on Linux or Windows. Once again, the Mac is going to be a show down the road. It's because the whole thing today is really, what does RCC use? I personally use a Mac at my home office, and it works pretty good, and it's how I can stay current with it, because I'm not really a fan of Windows, and Linux is this command line, which makes me feel very voodoo-y. And so I run the Mac, but it's not an AWS thing. If you want to have that kind of capability and redundancy and reliability and all that sort of stuff, you really need to be thinking about the server with AWS, where they're going to sell you a slice of server, a virtualized slice of server. And if any of you have a question of what that is, today's conversation is going to be on that. Super important. I'm going to remind Margaret here. If we have questions, Margaret and I are going to be running interference on questions. If any of you folks ask questions that are like way off topic or advanced, we're going to defer the questions till the top of the hour or to the next day or something, right? All right. So Mr. Taylor, so today is an overview. Now I'm taking notes today.
Yep.
So I'm going to be making notes, an outline of this. So where do we even start this conversation? I mean, I kind of laid it out. So we recommend using AWS.
Yep.
If someone wants to ask about Azure, that is not going to be what we're going to be covering.
Correct.
I think the FileMaker server installation part of it would be appropriate to any Windows server you have, or any Linux server generally. But half this conversation is about just the infrastructure of AWS and getting through that. And the other half is FileMaker installs and setting up the backups and stuff like that. So with that in mind.
And overview today is also things like strategy. Why? Like, why do we even care? That's the question you always ask, right?
Yeah, I always, why do we care? Why? I mean, I ask it more crass than that, but yeah, why are you here, and why should I give a shit?
Many people in the audience have FileMaker servers. Maybe you're thinking about it. Maybe you have one already. Maybe you even support them for your business. There's a bunch of different options that you can start with. So let's talk about, just as an overview, hosting, like why AWS, right? I kind of wanted to start with that. There's a little story with that at RCC that goes back over half a decade now. But the short version is we go with them because, and I say this as a joke, and I also mean it though, when they go down, you hear about it, like the 5 p.m. news. They're not, it's not that there's no issues or that they're the absolute cheapest on the market, just driving the hardest bargain for value versus services. You pay a little overhead, honestly, for Amazon. It isn't the cheapest one on the market. They're not the most expensive by far either. You can find many more expensive hosts, to be honest, but they're good. They're reliable. They work well. The stuff that they says is, I'll say it's a little bit complicated to price stuff out sometimes, just as far as adding up all the little pennies and stuff that get to your final number that you're looking for. I can help with that, by the way, but like just as far as it goes, they work. However, if you need to find an alternative, do so. There's a lot of people I've noticed in the news lately. There's a through line of people, we'll say, moving out of the cloud sometimes, and I just wanted to address like why do we do that? There's a couple different reasons. We pick Amazon over the others. That would be like Azure or Google Cloud are usually the top three that people talk about. There's a bunch of smaller players though, to be honest. Mostly because they're the big name. If Amazon goes down, you hear about it on the 5 p.m. news. If your server and that whole data center region or something, like if you guys all watch the news with tech stuff at all, you'll know every, I don't know, 2 or maybe 3 years, Amazon has some minor that becomes calamitous problem that like wipes out a whole region temporarily. Almost nobody loses data in those, but it makes the 5 p.m. news because half the internet runs on this stuff now. That's good and bad for basically the same reason. And so that's basically why we recommend them. They don't go down until they do. And that can leave you to sleep well at night. There's also a couple specific features that I'll say I personally, but this is for our clients, like about Amazon and recommend them for. I don't know how much we're going to address it. It would otherwise be at the very end of this stream series, probably Friday, honestly. But I'll just note it here. The backup system that you can set up in Amazon allows you to place files in a location that can't be modified even by the account holder. And that is incredibly useful. We call it ransomware protection, like when we're kind of selling this stuff to clients or whatever. But fundamentally, because that's what it does. Yes.
One second, Margaret, I just need Margaret to take a breath, or you to take a breath.
Yes.
Strategic breath. Margaret, can you show the diagram, please, for me? This is AWS up here, everyone. See that? They're outside the business. Okay.
Yeah. So addressing the diagram is talking about backups fundamentally. Mm-hmm. If you're thinking about ransomware, the general like model on stuff like that is they lock up your files. You can't get into them. They sell you access to get your stuff back. Short version. What this lets you do, and it's a combination of different features in Amazon, is it lets you lock your files in Amazon so that the ransomware people also can't get to them. You can't get to them either, but they can't get to them. The other reason that this feature is used is in like legal compliance and stuff like that. So if you have log files that are relevant to a court, your lawyers get in there and sequester the files so they can't be touched, for review purposes or whatever. That's fundamentally what the feature is, and that's why it's like hardcore lockdown, because that's legal investigation stuff, very serious. That said, back to the diagram. You can use this in Amazon. You can use it on site. We've deployed this on people's on-site servers. They have to have fast enough internet connection, to be honest, but and there are other companies that offer, we'll say, similar features, but we work with Amazon, so that's what we've integrated with. Okay. This would let you, it's easy inside Amazon, and a bunch of the stuff's free because you're in Amazon, honestly, but it lets you post up like copies of your database, copies of your container data, whatever, the whole solution, if you will, up to a location in the cloud that can't be modified by anybody, and that includes you. It's a really great sleep well at night. We've, thank Lord, never had to use it. We've never had somebody truthfully attacked, which is fantastic. But every server that we deploy at this point has something like that. With the exception of the Linux ones, they're handled a little differently, basically. But it's one of the reasons why we deploy, and everyone's surprised by this, so many Windows servers. And it's because we can just do that. We have a built-in system for it, and we can pack up the database, pack up the container data, push it up into this location, and then you're good to go. Now, that's kind of a detour, but I just wanted to note that at the front. That is an example of one of the reasons that we selected Amazon specifically for our hosting considerations. Their performance is good. I'll also note another thing, like a lot of people like Amazon, and like I said, you pay a little extra for it, for flexible performance. And that means, frankly, directly, you can always pay for more performance. You can always write a bigger check. You would probably be surprised by how large some of the checks people are writing are for this stuff, when they need a really big server to do really big stuff. Those are available on Amazon, though. You can always pay for that. So if you need a monster thing with just hundreds of cores or something like that, and you don't want to go buy the hardware yourself and host it and have a cabinet in a data center and pay people to manage it and like all this other stuff, you can offshore that to Amazon and they'll do it for you at a lovely monthly fee. So
Yeah, so at the basic level, Amazon's going to provide you they're going to essentially they buy a bunch of hardware, they put it in a data center, they provide the internet capability to that in a most rudimentary, basic for beginner sort of way. They provide all the battery backup power, the backup internet power, the staff to keep it all running. That's all handled. So when you pay for your EC, this is basically, if I draw over here, it's a EC2 server, but it's AWS, and they call it EC2 is what's the EC? Elastic Cloud Compute.
Elastic Compute.
Elastic Compute. So it's EC2, which really sucks as a naming thing. Basically, that means you're renting or leasing or subscribing to a slice of a server. So the server is a refrigerator size server, whatever it is, and you're one of 50 people that has a slice of that server, whatever, however that math works out. So and so yeah, so that's the idea. So then they take care of it. They babysit it. If something happens, they take care of it. Your job is basically just to get it installed and make sure FileMaker Server is running on it, and then you manage the FileMaker part of it. Let Amazon manage the rest of it, right? So
we've talked about Amazon. Why do we host there? Why, gave an example of a feature. Next one is, and we're going to do two of these this week, two different server installs. We're doing Linux and then Windows, I think, in that order. Why would you pick one or the other? And there are considerations. We'll address a little bit of the non-cloud just because I want to include it in here, but there are considerations for both. So we'll deal with Linux first. That it's one of our highest demand. It's why I suggested to Richard earlier that we do Linux first on the stream. There's a lot of people that want to see it. They want to begin deploying their own Linux servers. They honestly may be mostly unfamiliar with it. As a cool thing, if you have an Android phone, you're running it already. And it's not so different actually, the interface, but it's command line under the hood.
yep.
That fact, though, it's command line under the hood, is both a huge upside because you can get in and root around under the undercarriage of the operating system. Also, you have to root around under the undercarriage of the operating system sometimes. Some people don't like that. They want to come in and Windows or Mac or something like this. They want a beautiful graphical environment. They want to click around and do stuff like that. Perfect. That's why it's there. That's why it exists. Technically, you can even do that on Linux. We're actually going to do a command line install later this week because I want that to be the primary thing that people are thinking of.
Yep.
And so people get familiar with that because truly that's where their greatest value will be found. We'll address it later, but there's some different implications and stuff to having a graphical environment there related to security and stuff like that. That said, for Linux, there's a couple there's a couple core differences, say, between a Windows FileMaker server and a Linux FileMaker server. Not talking about FileMaker feature support, any of this kind of stuff. It's just like the operating system itself. So first, you're probably going to be dealing with a Linux server unless it's on your desk or something like that. It'll probably be command line only. Not always. Like I said, you can do it a different way, but it'll probably be command line only. So you'll want to be comfortable with that. If you want a graphical environment, you might pick Mac or Windows. As far as backups go, I mentioned it earlier. It's a lot easier to do a ransomware offsite on something like a Windows server and not a Linux one. That's like a trade-off, we'll say, in favor of Windows. However, for Linux servers, unless you buy one of the kinds of Linux that has licensing with it, like a Red Hat or something like that, where there's some kind of a fee attached, you get stuff for that. I'm not going to cover it here. It's not like worthless, basically. But if you pick something like Ubuntu, which is what FileMaker Server supports these days, it's just free. So what you're paying for is the hardware at Amazon, and that's basically it. You pay for the refrigerators, the servers, the storage, whatever, this kind of stuff, right? So
Let me clarify. So this help. I'm going to say this a different way. So
yeah,
when you are paying for your slice over here, so I'm going to come back over here,
yep,
and I don't know if
top
I can
right.
draw or not. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So we're over here, and you're paying for this AWS server right here. The question becomes, how is it priced and all those sorts. Amazon takes care of all the hardware for you, all the pricing for you. They also roll in, if it's Microsoft, the license fee for that server.
Yep,
And so that's what Jacob said, but he said it kind of a different way. So
yep,
I'm reiterating this for beginners. AWS is going to bundle everything you need into one price point. Okay. And the whole idea with that is that you don't have to worry about writing a check to Microsoft and paying them. You're just going to pay one person a monthly bill. Mine goes on my American Express for the company, and we get this bill and the Microsoft license in there. Linux essentially at the end of the day is a free operating system. Okay. You can buy support for it, things like that, which is over and above. But at the end of the day, when Amazon sets up a server for you, they're not going to, they don't have to pay Microsoft extra. The fee on a Windows server, I would say probably close to a third of it's probably a Microsoft license. It's not cheap,
yeah.
right?
And to be honest, it goes up from there. So if, as mentioned earlier, you want to pay for that additional horsepower, a lot of additional cores for your server, for example, because you got a lot of users. Windows licensing is per core. Now, it's built into the price that you pay to Amazon, so you don't have to see or care about that. But at a certain point, you start caring about it because the monthly bill comes through. And so I don't say warn you against it or something like that. It's just something to be aware of. If you
Just
pick
be
that,
aware of it. Yeah.
yeah, if you pick a Windows server, it's an implication. At the lower end, the difference is in tens or twenties of dollars. It fundamentally it doesn't matter really. It doesn't matter. But when you get up into the $500,000, 500 or $1,000 plus range for a server, you start talking about a
That's
non
per month. We're talking per month,
per
right?
month.
So,
Yeah,
so in the big scheme of things, we're going to talk pricing maybe a little bit later, but the big scheme of things, what's the lowest price we see on a, is it T3 large these days or T4 large? What's our lowest server that?
correct. The cheapest would be a Linux one, and those are 70, 75, something like that for a baseline one. You're going to be at minimum, I think 90 or 95 for Windows. So
Okay.
it's not bad, but
Okay, so
20 bucks.
75 is dollar is for I'm going to say T4 large. Is that what we had? Kind of, and that's the T4
T3,
is
yeah.
a spec. Oh, is it T3? Okay, T.
I'm doing like for like.
Okay, yeah.
There's some different. We'll get into the hardware in a second.
Yeah. But the point is that the price when Jacob says 500 to 1,000, the entry level on this is about $75 is what I'm setting the base ballpark
Yeah,
on that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then
And
if you want to throw a lot of shit at it, a lot.
we have reasonably large businesses that pay, I don't know, 250 or 300 bucks a month.
Mhm.
So when I say 500 to 1,000, it's a pretty beefy server. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not nothing.
exactly. So once again, the operating system is an for Windows is going to be an add-on cost. And then for Linux, it's just essentially you just get it for free. So all you're
Yep,
paying for is just the Amazon hardware, electricity, internet, all that, whatever that part
yep,
of it is. So yeah.
yep. And we're gonna have links for a bunch of this stuff as well. When we talk about the hardware here in a second, I want to address it also because
Do we want to switch back to your screen now?
if
Are
you want
we
to,
okay?
yeah,
Yeah.
I have the pricing tool honestly has like way too much info on it, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a little selection because that'll make it a lot easier to deal with. This is I started with this. I probably should have started somewhere else. This is the Amazon console. You'll go. We send people links like we have like an onboarding email, but
Hmm.
basically you go sign up on. It's like this link right here, console.aws.amazon.com. You go
Hmm.
create an account, sign in if you already have one, whatever.
Hmm.
I'm logged into one of our other accounts, so there's like
Okay.
almost nothing in here. Um, but basically, this is where you'll end up. You'll end up on this, which is we call this the Amazon console,
Hmm.
different from the FileMaker Server admin console, or be another one. Oh God, you even have the My Claris stuff these days.
Claris, yeah.
Yeah, Claris stuff.
The
Anyway,
customer console, yeah.
yeah. So so the main two services that we deal with day to day are EC2 and S3. EC2, as mentioned, that is where your virtual server itself lives. That'll have your hard drives. Yep, I've got all these things in tabs here. I'm gonna go over here. I don't care about this little blue thing. So we have instances that are running. This is where you're like, I know they're called elastic IP addresses. I find that to be a very funny name.
Yeah, it's backwards.
It took me a long time to figure out why it's elastic. But for all intents and purposes, elastic is actually static IP addresses.
Static
as
address,
most people
yes.
use them. So there's all that here. All instances, they're called instances. It's like a virtual server, your slice. They have a key attached on Linux, which we'll address during the setup and stuff. That's how you'll access the server itself. It's a file that you're given, and then you can use that to log into the machine. On Windows, you use that file to get your Windows, like the initial administrator password, basically. And
Okay.
you can see some of this other stuff here. Anyway, instances, you can see we have 0 of them. We're going to have 2 by the end of this. And that'll show you where, let me show it because it's empty. There's nothing in here. You launch an instance. Go back. This security group is Amazon's name for a firewall. That is how we're going to, for example, during setup, people may be familiar, FileMaker Server, like Pro and Go, access on port 5003. We have to like allow that to come in, right? We'll do that on a security group. Volumes, that is Amazon's name for a hard drive. They're called volumes because everything is virtual. It's all fake. So, but fake doesn't mean you can do whatever the heck you want. A big note and an important note for doing things up in the cloud, it is very easy to make things bigger most of the time. It is, depending on the thing, it can be somewhat difficult to make it smaller. Hard drives are one of the things that it is difficult to make smaller. It's possible. I will never show someone how to do it though, because there's so many risks and downsides to that. Most people just make a new drive, copy data over, and then or a new smaller drive, we'll say, copy data over, and then that becomes the new drive.
Okay, so let me reframe this just briefly here. So Jacob is talking about the size of your hard drive on your virtual server, and you pick a drive size. And there is a little scale that we can dive into on the server, and we can say, hey, it's not big enough. We want a bigger drive. And you can press a button and upsize the drive, which is one of the benefits of this big virtualization business. Like, hey, I want a bigger drive. You don't have to call your IT group, whine, complain. They say we need a PO for a bigger drive. Got to buy the drive, install the drive. It's a standard business feature on Amazon for you to have a little sliding scale and upgrade to this bigger size. So. Yeah. So I'm doing terminology so everyone's up to speed. EC2 is the overall name for the virtualized hardware business at Amazon. Instance, if you see the word instance, this is your virtual server. If you have 2 virtual servers, you have 2 instances. Security group is a firewall, and volume, we've seen that other places, is the term that Amazon uses for your hard drive.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, correct.
I'm taking notes. That's why I'm writing it. I'm telling you what my notes say. So there we go.
Yeah.
I get an A+ from my teacher. Thank you, teacher.
Yep. And I'll address it because it's a thing that matters, but we're not going to cover it in any depth in this. On a technical basis inside Amazon, everything you do is inside your own cloud. I know Amazon's one big cloud. You think of it as one big cloud. You build your own cloud, you can actually do that. So if you wanted to construct tons of servers, it's why they call it an instance. If you could think of like you needed 25 FileMaker servers, you can like clone a bunch of them. Those would be 25 instances. You could take that from the same FileMaker server, like one copy of one server, and go and have 25 of them. That's why they're called instances.
Cool. Yeah.
So just so like the terminology makes sense. So some things they name that way, and it's like, why did they name it that? It's for the scalability reason. It's because we're talking about one server. You're probably going to be talking about one server. My FileMaker server, my business's FileMaker server. They are thinking of servers in general. They have hundreds of thousands or millions of the things on global data centers. I should probably have that page up with all their regions and edge locations and all this stuff. It's gotten pretty crazy. They even have like satellite uplinks and stuff these days. So there's all kinds of wild
Well,
stuff
we
you can
should
do on
probably
Amazon.
cover that though, because we can't really do edge locations. We just do regions,
No,
right?
but we
Still.
can do yeah, it's probably even.
Okay, so back up. So this is a test question for everyone. This is audience participation time. Margaret, are you ready? What is a major determining factor in the performance of a FileMaker solution that's running on a server? What is and I'm looking at Discord here. There's NJ. Here comes NJ. Latency. NJ gets the gold star. Congratulations, NJ. I'm going to probably have to disqualify you from answering questions in the future.
That's
There's Fox.
fine.
Fox. Oh, so Foxy Jacks helps with that. So here's the two things. There's not a 1-to-1 ratio on this stuff, but so Jacob, let's look at the United States for the moment here. Let's take a look at that. Or I don't know if you want to just plus. Can you zoom in on that? Or I don't know if you can zoom in on that or not. Let me see. Click on that. Just click. Okay, well, not really. So here's the deal. If I close that, so say I'm going to draw onto Jacob's screen here. Stand by. Here comes the draw. So we are here, say, for example, or we're up here. We want to pick a server that is close as possible where we are. So if this is where most of the little people are, I'm going to draw a little person here, little arms, and this is your office right here. And most of the people here, you want a server that is as close as possible. Okay. The reason is that the further you get from the server, there are more routers and network hardware between you and that spot. Every time the signal, people go, well, how fast is the internet? Well, it's the same speed as electricity. Well, how fast electricity? Speed of light. Okay, kind of. So it's if it was one wire, it'd be the speed of light, right? 168 million miles an hour, whatever the hell that is. The problem is it hits these routers and these switches. We all have one in our house, our modem, right? It goes in there and it processes and the machine thinks about it. Then it forwards the signal out. It doesn't go straight through. So every time you hit a router, if you're going, it stops, you slow down, you stop, you slow down, you stop. So you want to be as close as possible, which removes the delay. That delay is called latency. So a small latency number is good. A big latency number is bad. And so at the end of the day, when we're talking about, if I clear all my drawings here, at the end of the day, you want to have a server that's as close to you as possible, which means that you need to look. Like if someone calls us and you're not thinking about this, we're going to say, hey, where are you? And you would say, well, we're in wherever, Montreal, Canada, or someplace or whatever, right? And the issue becomes, what is the closest data center to you? And so people look at this is where data center. So what if you're over here? Hey, you may not have a close Amazon server. What about if you're over here? You're shooting missiles back and forth with Ukraine and Russia and whatnot, right? Well, I don't know. There's a data center there, right? So these are all things you have to think about. We have successfully connected during a live stream all the way to Mumbai, India, which is where the hell over here somewhere, right? Isn't that over there somewhere?
Yep.
Take it loosely.
Yep.
That number, so all of you know, was 332 milliseconds. It was a fairly reliable number. Microsoft Claris officially recommends a number of performance, ideally less than 150, to make sure that you don't lose your mind. I consider 100 a better number, but yeah. So anyway, just to understand the framework. So between you where you're at and the second floor of the building you're in, it might be 1 millisecond or a half a millisecond. 1 millisecond. Okay. That's latency. Then all the way to Mumbai, India, which could be 332. And that's with everything working correctly. If you have some network hardware that starts dropping off and there's an outage, this number could go 600, 600, drop packets entirely, 200, 200. It's just, it just becomes a mess. So just understand generally the number ideas that have it close. So I'll leave latency alone. We've covered that.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So as far as like where you're going to pick where you go, that's pretty much the biggest determinant is going to be how close you can get to your server. If any of you game or have kids that do, I would frame it in those terms. It's FileMaker, at least for the time being, is pretty sensitive to latency. In other words, you want it to be as low as possible. That's what drives you being as close to the server as possible, fundamentally. There's things that you can do on your own end that help with that, honestly. If you think about having like a DSL internet connection versus maybe cable or even fiber these days, each of those are progressive improvements toward better performance. Yeah, oh, I get a gigabit or some big number like that. Lovely. Maybe even multiple these days. I bet there's somebody out there who's got 5 that's in the audience. But the actual key improvement of stuff like that is that it's wildly lower latency, and so you can get substantially better. We'll call it database performance, but it's not. It has nothing to do with your database design or anything like that. It's purely that you send a request for a record up to FileMaker Server, and it's able to return it. And it's nothing to do with FileMaker Server or even your own computer. It is just the communications delay between those two conversations. So
cool. All right. Next.
We do have a question real fast, which I'm going to toss. Could I buy my Windows server and then activate the license in AWS?
Yes. I don't recommend that, but you can totally do it. Yeah. As a minor detour, basically they give you no CALs, which is what usually people are looking for when they're purchasing a Windows license, the client access license. That is one of the things that you can pay for with a Microsoft license. They give you no CALs. They give you 1 remote desktop seat. So if you need more than that, correct, you're going to be asking that question and trying to find your way with that. You can do it. So short version.
There you go.
Let's see. Oops, I don't need any of that stuff. Also,
Andrew just asked a question. Margaret Andrew from Liverpool.
Is that a question? Oh, okay. I missed the R at the beginning there. Are there minimum upload and download speeds on your local internet provision?
Minimum, no, but if it's low, you need to fix that because faster is better. Just generically, you want to do. If you're on DSL, it's doable. If you have a well optimized, it's one of those things where you can always spend time working around not spending money. Like if you have you could spend a lot of time excruciatingly optimizing your FileMaker database to deal with the fact that you have slow internet connections. That's a thing you can do. You can also just pay for faster internet. So like you have to, as a business, you have to evaluate which money is better spent. And sometimes it'll balance one way or the other. Sometimes it's a little of both. These days, if you're on actually slow internet, I would recommend trying to upgrade that first, than spending a whole lot of time on engineering. There's some modern FileMaker features, server and client being both modern versions, we'll say, where you can get some additional performance where the server will help you out with like sorting or filtering records and stuff like that. We deal with that on other live streams, but that helps with slower internet. It won't help with like high packet loss internet or stuff like that. That said, we have clients that do iPads in the ocean over Starlink. So latency, I mean, they spend a lot of time on engineering to deal with that level of latency. It works pretty well, actually, I'm told, but yeah. So for their clients, they're technically a competitor of ours. Anyway, so Amazon, the other main service that we deal with. So EC2 we dealt with. There's your virtual server slices. The other part is this backups conversation. And backups is the biggest thing in FileMaker forever, frankly. It's even bigger than performance or anything else. And that is because it is whether or not you have good and working backups determines whether you can recover the business in some kind of disaster. You're going to have a minimum number of disasters in something like Amazon because you're in a cloud host. That's helpful, but I'm going to talk about it at a high level anyway, because if you are an on-site customer and you're listening to this, you need to deal with it. If you, for example, are at your business on an on-site server and you installed FileMaker Server and did really not much else, posted your files live and you've been using it for years, wonderful. You probably only have 7 daily backups. I cannot recommend strongly enough against that. You need more. You want different kinds of backups. You want backups in different places. In Amazon, this is really easy because I can spit out a set of copies on the hard drive. I can spit out a second set of copies that go into S3. I'm going to talk about what that is and how it works in just a second, as this is a precursor to why we're talking about backups here and why S3. But I just, as a generality and talking to the public, please have additional backups. Please have extra backups. They are what allow you, when disaster strikes, to not have the worst possible day of your life. Not a good day, because disaster has struck, but You can get out of it with a minimum of fingers lopped off or arms lost or whatever type problems for your business. And so we in general will tell people to do hourly, daily, weekly, monthly if you want backups. Each of those have different purposes and matter for different reasons and at different points for something like a disaster recovery. But more backups are always better. And if you're an on-site customer, few backups on a hard drive, backups on a NAS. If you have some kind of a cloud service, a lot of people have Backblaze or something like this, Dropbox, whatever. They're not even similar or comparable, frankly, but like things like that, use it. Serious, use it. For Amazon, things that we can do that are easy and somewhat built in. S3. S3 is a giant, we used to call it a giant, like an FTP folder in the cloud, because you can make a folder up there inside your account and you can post files to it. And they are reasonably of almost infinite size. You are mostly limited by like how fast you can upload that file on a like megabytes or gigabytes per time period basis. And honestly, you can pay for faster of that, but you're getting a fast server at that point. And so you'll know when you get there, you'll know if you have a really big solution. Anyone who's ever dealt with a big solution and has an on-site server or something like that, there are implications to that. You got to buy fast hard drives, you got to buy big hard drives, you got to have multiples, RAID or this kind of stuff. Amazon tries its best to cover over those details, but it is no different. It's just you hit those details later in the process and at much bigger sizes. That's all.
All right, so Canva has a question, and
Sure.
he's kind of leading us into where our next I think where this conversation is going is can you back up to different locations? And back up a second. Do you still have that diagram real quick on screen, that diagram of the map, Jacob Taylor? Or did it
I don't have it. That was on.
Okay, that was somewhere else. Okay.
Yep.
So real quick, it's important to understand. So Amazon has what they call regions, okay? A region is like the Western United States or one of those dots.
Regions.
Okay, so this is super important real quick. I'm going to cover this. So let's just take a look at this region, right? It doesn't really matter. What makes up this region? It's an Amazon data center. No, it's probably 3, 4, 5 buildings, a giant building with little windows and little doors and it's not labeled. It's unmarked. It's like unmarked patrol cars. The police are hiding in front of your house, an unmarked car. Unmarked buildings. Why? So they don't get blown up by terrorists and like that. And so one region will have multiple whole giant data centers that'll be probably across town or something, and they all have their own special cross connection. Those buildings represent one region. Well, when I buy an instance, Margaret, so it's instant on EC2. If I buy an instance in this region, how do I know where it's at? You don't know where it's at. Why would you care? You have no idea.
It's not like you want to go up and like go grab it off the shelf.
They're not going to let you visit. Hey, I want to visit my server. Can I visit my server? No. You're not even allowed to know where the building's at, right? All of you probably drive by Amazon data centers. You don't even know what it is, right? It's like some random warehouse, right? And but yeah, Oompa Loompas go in, come out, right? But you don't know what happens. So understand that that's what these events. And so the question becomes when you back up, here we go. Your FileMaker server could be over here. You'd never know. FMS happens to be, it's on EC2 over here, and you're writing an S3 backup. Your S3 backup might be over here. So you could have but you wouldn't even really know that it's off site. So one of the things you can do is target your backups to, and Jacob's heading this way, I'm sure, target your backups to another region, because you run into these deals where you've got a hurricane hits down. Notice if we zoom in down here where the hurricanes go and screw up the United States, there are no dots down there because they don't want to have to dig the salt water out of the bottom of the data center. So, so just understand that you can send data from one region to another region, and we're going to get into this. So that was Canberra's question. Can you? There we go. That's a great. So yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
It's on Margaret.
And
if you want to see Margaret's took over real quick for you. She's going to pop this picture up. So I don't know if that constitutes a region, because those buildings are really close to each other, and
that's one campus. If anyone's familiar with
so multiple
Virginia, which is US East 1, that's like the first and oldest Amazon region. It's default in a bunch of stuff. It's It's honestly, I try not to deploy there because it's really variable the quality, and that's because you might get the one that they launched in 1996 or whatever when they first started the company, or you might get one that they built last spring, and those are, the latter is great and fantastic, all brand new hardware, new cables and everything.
Yeah.
That's just random. That said, anyone who lives in Virginia is probably familiar with the challenges that has caused over there because of the power draw, the fact that they're building the things all the time because everyone wants to use Amazon, and they're the biggest player in the market still. And there's no lack of demand for new services, and so they're having to I make it as I say it as a joke, but 3D print these billion-dollar facilities. Just every 6 months they've got to shoot a new one out or something. I don't know if it's that fast, but like it's
Oh yeah.
often. It's
Oh yeah.
often.
Well,
And so like that on screen here is one of those facilities. Um,
that's
and
not the
so
region. That's just a campus in the region, right?
that's one campus. Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be 4 data centers right there, but that
Oh, I'm
won't be
sure.
like the whole thing.
Right,
That's
for the
that's
region.
one
Yeah.
little
So.
chunk. Yeah. And we'll just quickly address it because we're talking about cross-region stuff here.
Hmm.
Do hide meeting controls. Perfect. So looking at our regions, we
Okay.
have all of our little dots here. So on
Hmm.
S3, and you can see here we have a couple buckets in here. That's what their term for it is. FTP folder in the cloud, but they're buckets. That's what they call them. It's a bucket of files. It's your bucket of files. That name, for example, RCC transcription demo bucket. Here I could be more usefully referring to it. That one is the globally registered name. So only one company, well, anybody, whatever, one anything, has that name. It's us, by the way. And it is technically in US West 2, which is Oregon. Now, what that means is by default, the files live in Oregon at the big Oregon data center. I think it's by the Dales or something. If y'all are, if anyone's familiar with the area, um, so, but that means the files are there. Okay, so what happens if we want to I always make the joke of being media resistant, right? Like that's the biggest problem that you have with hosting in the cloud. You can have power failures and stuff like that. They'll bring your stuff back, whatever. But the biggest one is like, I don't know, the data center gets blown up basically. And I don't know what's going to do that. Probably a meteor might. And so maybe you want an additional copy in Germany or something like that. You can build. So you can do a couple things. You can just literally upload data both places. Um, and I always recommend stuff like this, which is using Amazon as itself, using it like natively, or using the features that are built in to accomplish those tasks. You can do cross-region replication. I'm not going to demo that during the series, but just make you aware that that exists. If you wanted a legitimately off-site, geographically, it's on a different continent, you might back it up in Germany or France or something like that. Perfect. That's a thing that you can just configure, and you can say, all right, once a day, grab my backups, shoot them over to Germany. Done. Right? So if you have what will probably be the worst day of your life for your business, you will have some other way to retrieve that data, because even if literally the Oregon region is the one that is hit by the meteor, if it doesn't, I don't know, kill all life on Earth like the dinosaurs or some awful thing, you're going to go talk to the German interface and go start downloading copies of your files and trying to put your business back together again, basically in that case. And so it allows you a very, very solid amount of sleeping well at night that the thing isn't just going to disappear, because it isn't. And this is one of the reasons people are concerned about going to the cloud. It's not a server under your desk. You can't kick it when you need to. Um, it's challenging for people to conceptualize that because they're used to, even people that used to do servers, Richard used to do servers. Like that's a huge value. It's a huge risk too. You are then responsible for all the power, all the backups, all the redundancy, all this stuff, and that can be fine. Some people want to take that on. It's very valuable to them. They're happy to spend the money and time and effort and all of this stuff. These days, you can make a different choice, which is just to try and let Amazon handle not all of it, but as much of that as is possible. That said, again, still on the topic of backups, we still always recommend additional. In our even onboarding, we have it's like number 6 on the little guide. It's the last one. But if you have a Dropbox, if you have OneDrive, like any of those services, that just they're easy to do on like a Windows server, but there's a lot of different ways that you could address that need of not a non-Amazon backup, we'll call it. If you put all eggs in one basket, that basket is Amazon. You can use Amazon to do geographic replication. That's one concern that a business could have about restoring their data in a disaster. But another is just, I have some problem with the provider being Amazon. Then you can say, well, maybe I want whatever, some other kind of backup. We usually use Dropbox as the example because they're a big old file host, but take your pick, basically, whatever's going to work for you. So, and I mentioned it earlier, S3 is where the feature happens where you can lock the folders. Like I said, it's a combination of specifically of different features, I think 2 or 3, if I remember right, wiring them all together. You have to turn on versioning for this bucket, which is what it sounds like. You could write. So if you had like a backup and you named it backup.zip, you could keep writing that file over and over again. If you have versioning turned on, you will have each completed upload, if you will. Even though it's all named the same thing, it'll somewhat dangerously look the same in the interface. You'll have one backup.zip, but there's like a little dropout where you can say, show me the versions, and then it'll show backup.zip, and it'll be like versions 1 through 30 or whatever you have, right? So you can that's the first feature. Second one is combining that with the locking system I mentioned earlier. We do it in we'll call it compliance mode because it's meant for legal compliance, but it is a ransomware protection, and that same lock it in place that allows the lawyers to feel comfortable that their evidence has been preserved for later review or whatever y'all are dealing with. It doesn't matter, honestly. But that same kind of lock it in place can be used to defend against ransomware. And because fundamentally what happens is the attacker in this case goes and encrypts your stuff, and it goes up. It might even talk to your Amazon backups and stuff and look at those and go, oh, we're going to encrypt those too. That's the danger people get into. Well, what did I just say? You can upload the same file over and over again, and there will be multiple available to pick. So if your first copy is locked up, you're good to go. You just have to go pull the oldest. That's it. And it's just merely not encrypted. And so you're good.
Service again?
They have a bunch of technical names for it. I call it ransomware protection.
I know that.
Immutable backup is what I usually call it.
Immutable is the word that you.
Immutable is a technical term. Yeah, immutable cannot be changed. And that's because fundamentally, like I said, what happens is even if you, in air quotes, change it, you change the backup, you lock the backup, you ransomware it, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't. That's a second copy, and so you always have that original. There's a third thing that goes with that, which is obviously if they're locked up, you have to be able to undo that, right? You want to delete them someday. You don't want to keep them in perpetuity. I mean, maybe you do, but not for this purpose, basically. And so there's a locking period. You can set a number of days for that. It can be 1 to, I actually don't know what the limit is at the top end. We set it for 30 by default, but you can go much longer. But like I said, if you keep, you're charged for the whole time period, so be careful. Mm-hmm. And then there's a feature that goes with that automatically cleans those extras out once they're unlocked at the end of the time period. So
we have a question which I'm going to toss. Having an on-premise virtual machine running FM server, should I transfer it to AWS, or is it better to start a new one in AWS?
I would do a new one.
I don't even know if you could transfer.
You can.
Can you?
Yep. Very old story. My non-RCC hosting things that we have done, the very, very, very first version of that, we were on a Pentium 3 at a friend's grandma's living room. Not kidding. It was a very long time ago. It was when I first got started, little Jacob lore on stream. And we took that Pentium 3, the hard drive itself, turned it into an image, and then uploaded that to a server host. That was the very first version we ever did.
I'm shocked that would ever work. I'm shocked that
you can 100% do that. I'll tell you why I wouldn't, though, to address the question more fully. First, you get a clean setup, you get a clean start over for stuff like that. That's good for a couple reasons. There's some differences and some things to embrace inside virtual hosts that would be different from an on-site one if you're on VMware, Hyper-V, something like that usually. And so, yeah, you can do a straight upload if you have like some kind of self-contained vendor app or something that's just awful to reconfigure. Situations like that, it makes sense to just upload it. And so that may be the right choice. FileMaker's not. It's not difficult to set up. We're going to do two different setups this week. And, those might be those might be over an hour streams, but not by too much
Right.
necessarily. It's just not that difficult these days. And honestly, most of that is credit to Claris. It used to be a lot more difficult when I was hired. It's a lot easier now. We used to have pages and pages and pages of directions for all the different little things that you had to do. It's gotten to a pretty, still not zero, but it's gotten to a pretty short list these days. And so there's that kind of stuff. And so you have a chance to start fresh. The other is, and I'll just say it's not obvious. You want to do it actually because it forces you to document configuration changes you've made. Because you will get up into Amazon and something that is, you always do it that way, or you've forgotten because it's been set up for 5 years or something. You're going to break it or blow it up, or that's why you test first, by the way. Don't just launch it into production. But you want to revalidate and re-verify that system as you take it live. And the benefit to that is you have the opportunity to write down your changes. You may even find new tweaks. It's a good time to go re-review the documentation of all the settings and stuff like that if you haven't done so recently, because you can end up where you find better settings by default. You figure out new backups, like whatever the case may be. There's a few different settings we always tweak out of the box on a FileMaker server. If you weren't doing that on site, boom, do it in Amazon. It can be your first place you do those things if you haven't. For example, the RAM cache on FileMaker server, we always turn that up, or almost always turn that up. No, pretty much always turn that up actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, so let me just throw a question here because I don't know that it matters too much. This is one of our other live stream people, the presenters that comes on. This is what we call him Fogel. Fogel. Yeah,
Yes,
Fogel.
Fogel. Yep.
Can Jacob please go into the details of the differences between using AWS and using a local server for a vertical market application? And I don't know.
you have the problem of licensing. So if you're an SBA, if you're doing a vertical market app, you would want to be in the SBA licensing program already. This is not
Yes.
super relevant to this stream, that part of it
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
With that will let you do we'll call it shared hosting that and you have to negotiate this with Claris, so there's an asterisk on that statement, but that would let you be in a shared hosting situation. So in general, FileMaker licensing is like one company, one server. Not one server, but don't put 7 different companies' apps on the same server is really what that means.
Yeah, that's not permitted at all.
Correct. Yeah.
So yeah.
So and so with an SBA program agreement with Claris, that changes. You can do what's called shared hosting. That's what that sounds like. Modern FileMaker Server has a limit of, and I think it's adjustable even, but it's 256 files by default. And so if you have a vertical market app and that's one file per each of your customers or their businesses, you could have a large volume of clients connected up to one beefcake machine, right? Okay.
But why? But I don't know that it matters in this case. I mean, how would that be different from AWS? That's what he's asking versus running your own
correct.
local server.
It's a management choice entirely. Yeah. So when you're on site, you're probably, so if you do little VMs and stuff like that and you're comfortable running, dozens probably of VMs or something like that, one per customer, or even a few customers on each one, something like this. You can do that on site. It's your management to do. If you do it in Amazon, it's going to be similar, and you're going to be asking their APIs to do the same thing.
Yeah.
From that perspective, it won't particularly be different. You, however, do take on all the downside risk of hardware failure and power outages and all this kind of stuff that goes with that. You won't have that at Amazon because it either won't happen in the first place, or it's not your downside risk. Amazon's to deal with, basically. So.
Yeah. I don't know that in an SBA situation versus, let's say, a corporate in-house developer, if there's really a difference in that scenario. Because here's the deal. Amazon is not going to let you pimp out them bill your customers for you, right? So if you have, say you have a solution, you sell it to 100 customers, Amazon's not going to bill those 100 customers on your behalf. There's probably companies that'll do that for you, right? But at the end of the day, Amazon is going to set you up a server. You're going to put 100 people's worth of solutions on there. You're going to bill those customers. They're going to use Amazon. How is that different than you buying a big ass server and putting it in your office?
Yeah.
It's the same consideration, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
with one
And,
company
and
or
I would say the main like business difference is who takes downside risk and cost amortization for it. So one, I'll say benefit to on-site hosting is that you write one big check once for your servers. That's not really true because obviously you have ongoing maintenance and stuff like that. Um, but like a lot of people think about it that way and then deal with the
Mhm.
maintenance as it happens. So fine. But if you're talking about like apples to apples comparison, let's say, a year's worth of costs
Mhm.
to compare the two, or 2 years or whatever, some reasonable time horizon like that, maybe 5 even. That's what a lot of businesses do. You're going to be writing that big check at least once every time during that time period. And so sometimes over the period, the cost will be lower on site. And that's because you can buy a super big server and get, really competitive performance. You're going to
Mhm.
pay for a screaming internet connection. You're going to pay a staff to monitor it, or manage it at least, and all that kind of stuff. So in general, like it may be a little cheaper, but you are the one that holds the risk in that scenario, and that is actually why there is a cost difference. Honestly, like that, the dollar amounts, that is your risk differential. And so consider that for your business.
Yeah,
Basically, that's what, as business advice. We're not, I'm not really talking FileMaker here. That's
yeah.
how I would say is that difference is basically business risk. Consider if that's worth it. Consider what that price differential looks like for you, and if that makes sense.
So
Some
yeah, let me just jump in here real quick. So Fogel's off talking about SBA. I'm not going to get into SBA conversation because this is not.
Nope.
But the short version, this is going to help everyone out here make this even more simple. Do you have an IT team? So you need a FileMaker server in-house or up in Amazon. Do you have an IT team already hired that works for you? Or two, are they agreeable and not assholes? I'm not being mean. I'm just saying if you go to them and say, can I have a FileMaker server? And they tell you to kiss their ass because we don't do FileMaker. That's a non-cooperative IT team. I can't do anything about that. Then if you have you have no IT or a non-cooperative IT, it goes to Amazon. It's over. The conversation is over. Okay. Then you say, well, what kind of operating system do we have? Well, if you have an IT team and they're cooperative in then they're going to tell you what they want. Mac, Windows, or Linux. Fine. You put it up on Amazon because you don't have an IT team. What kind of operating system are you going to have? Who is going to support that server? Is it going to be intermittently because you're going to hire a developer to do it, hire Jacob to do it, maybe? Then whoever's going to support it periodically or ongoing, you need to find out what they like, not what you like. I like Macs, but I want Jacob to be happy. So when we call him on Thursday night at midnight, wake him up or whatever happens, that he doesn't have to deal with it I like. He's going to deal with the stuff he's most comfortable with. So I go, Jacob, you're the support guy for me. And in the case of RCC, what do you like to work on? What's your preferred tool? He tells you that answer. It may not be my personal, but it's his personal. I want the IT person who I'm calling in the middle of the night to be happy and be supportive of that. So that's the decision making. It's that simple. Yeah, and then once again, Fogel, we can take that conversation off online, but you're drawing a connection there between cores and space, and um, yeah, once again, you have to price things out. There are pricing tools in here; they get pretty complicated, but at the end of the day, it's about $75 as an entry level server, and it goes up from there. And you can spend 500. You can actually spend what do you have, $2,000 a month kind of thing. At one point we had a server. I only ran it for a week. We were running tests on it, right? That was actually before you were brought on, Jacob. We were melting the FileMaker server, or maybe you were
No,
just.
I did that.
Were
Yeah,
you here?
that
That would
was
make.
an M. That was a big M. It was like a
Yeah,
4 or an 8 or something X large. It was, yeah,
yeah, yeah. It was, and we were trying to see it. We had
$2 an
400
hour or something like that. Yeah.
with 481 people on it, and it still kept running great. And that was FileMaker. It was an early version of 19. And then it only died whenever I told everyone to run a sub summary report at the same time on
Yep.
millions of records. And then it didn't crash. It slowed down. Everyone thought it crashed, but then it resuscitated itself. It's like it,
It got done eventually.
yeah, paddles are to itself, right? After,
Yeah.
and it came back to life. So, okay.
Someday we got to try that over again, actually, because
That'd be fun. I'd like to see what the
modern
yeah.
FileMaker can push some stuff, actually.
Yeah, we'll have
I've been
to.
pretty pleased.
Other questions, Mark?
Yes. We have one which is related to the minimum upload and download.
Yep.
Someone is 900 MB download, 100 MB upload acceptable?
Sounds great.
There you go.
That's it. Sounds great. Yeah.
Megabyte or is that megabit? Right?
It's large M,
Sure.
small b, because I always mess it up in my brain.
As prime megabit. That's what most
Yeah.
people.
Wow.
That's what their internet sells them as.
Yeah. Well, the limiting factor there is whether the people on your network are all watching Netflix and at the same time, right? So you can have whatever number you want, but if everyone, it's like here, I'm a Big Valley, and they all have lunch, and they get on their phones in there and they're watching YouTube videos. That's why I don't do the stream at 12 o'clock because the network would die. At 1 o'clock, they're supposed to be back wrenching on helicopters. I don't have to worry about it.
Very real consideration.
Yeah.
All right, what else do we need to cover on this introductory stuff, Jacob? So we have terminology, backups.
We got terminology, main Amazon services. I'm not even going to bore everybody with IAM and this kind of stuff because we're hardly going to touch it. We've got operating system picks. We covered hardware. We covered support for why you'd pick an operating system, support for the operating system, IT staff. If you want, we could do a very light like hardware specification conversation. I have two tabs open here, which are the instance. It's not even Amazon's own. It's a third party that made one. They do like pricing assistance for Amazon because it's a little complicated sometimes. And then also the tech specs for FileMaker Server, which has that, good, better, best, or whatever they're calling it now, for hardware in here somewhere. I forget where that is. It's down the page. Yeah. No, not Pro. Server. There you go. So if you go Windows and Linux, here you go. You can look at stuff like that. So probably the thing that surprises most people is Claris continues. This has actually been true the whole time I've worked here. Everyone has also ignored it for that entire period, just to be clear. But Claris continues to recommend 4-core servers or greater. Their bottom tier is 4-core. That is notable because for most clients, they're going to have probably a dual-core server or something like that as their in actual practice bottom tier. There's a reason for 4 though, and they've made that. They've been making that recommendation, I'll call it more real over time. There's been some recent patches for 21 that have come out that now actually like the scalability of how wide and how many tasks it can do simultaneously is based on the number of CPU cores. And so literally more is both. Yeah, you have more horsepower because you have more CPU cores in your server, and so you can, in a non-literal sense, do more things at once. But also literally FileMaker like has some kind of internal details, some concurrency numbers and things that are determined by what that number is, the number of CPU cores. So it's a thing to think about going forward. It can be a benefit actually for the on-site use case because some of those kind of servers you can buy an absolutely insane number of cores for. If you buy an older one, not that much money. So
real quick, Hot Air Balloon Ken, I think this comes up tomorrow, wants to know, is there a tab or a place in Amazon console where I can see, I'm going to see my instances and also see the size of the instances?
Yeah, right here.
So we're not running any right now. He's going to build
console,
them out.
Yep, console home. This is where you go when you're logged in. EC2. If EC2 is not on your home screen, I think that takes me where I want. Yes, it does. This is recently, obviously, so I'm going to go up here. I can do EC2. It'll bring up a bunch of few other things. EC2. Done. You're now on the home page. This shows you all of your different EC2 resources. There's some subservices like EBS. That is your hard drive, your volumes. And then you have instances, and you can filter by running, which it has up here at the top, or my screen's kind of small, so it's giving me instances over here. This would be all of them running or not. So if you have them shut down or you recently killed it, like deleted it, etc., those will show up here for a time period as well. But yeah, it'll look like this.
Cool. Yeah, so we're going to build those tomorrow, I think. So that's
correct. Yeah, we're gonna throw a Linux one up, and then and we're going to go over that and set up the firewalls for it. I'm going to try and set up a demo for snapshot backups just to show what lifecycle rules and stuff like that are for, or how they work. And then we'll do FileMaker Server. That'll be the fun part. That'll be Wednesday, I believe. So
yeah, Wednesday for that. So once again, we're trying to wing this together and keep it in spec. Any other things we want to cover on the introductory conversation?
That's most
You
of
need a
it.
credit card, give it to
You need a
Amazon.
credit
They're going to bill
card.
you. If your credit card bounces, they will shut your shit off. And then
Yeah, that's a
eventually,
fun one. If you don't pay, at least one of my customers a year learns what happens
I remember this.
when you
Okay,
don't pay.
so what happened is that they were doing an audit of their company and they had all these little bills on your credit card, and we all do that. We go through and like all this that we accidentally subscribe to, like the cookie of the month club, and you get a cookie, a box of cookies. You don't even remember. It has some weird name on it. So they saw this thing, Amazon or whatever. They're like, hey, screw that. So they killed it, right? And then they left it dead, and Amazon eventually deleted it, right? Right. And then they came back like, hey, where's our FileMaker server? And it's been off for months, right? Or whatever it was. It was
Yeah,
it was gone. And they came back like 6 months later and said, hey, where's the file server? Like, we don't know. We don't run it for you. We don't, whenever we set servers up, we let the customer pay the bill directly. So we don't get in the middle of it. It's not very smart business. I mean, ideally, we should take all your money and then mark it up 500%, or the bill from it and mark it up. But I want you to be responsible for your own bill, right? We're not really a hosting company. So the downside is you have to be enough of an adult not to put a gun to the head of your Amazon account and pull the trigger,
to
which is what they did. And then
delete the account
Amazon
that your server's in.
nuked their databases after what, 6 months or whatever it was. Don't There's some
Thir-
number.
30 days.
It was 30 days.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure they got all sorts of warning emails too.
They did.
oh, absolutely. But they said, oh, that's spam. Mark it, delete, 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 right?
Yep. They did the emails were they basically didn't understand what the email said, and so ignored it. And then that went on long enough that they came
But it
calling.
wasn't running. The server was shut off. So they would
Yep.
for a whole month, it wasn't running. So if you were using it and you were dependent upon it, it doesn't work, then you start calling RCC
Yep.
or developer or someone and hey, it
Yep.
doesn't work. Then we figure out you haven't paid your bill. And right, but this got way beyond that to the point where Amazon went, okay,
Yeah.
good.
They forwarded us emails, and I translated them, and the translation was, we deleted your stuff. Or we're about to delete your stuff, and then later we deleted your stuff. And it was because they fully did the account close process, and at no point did they check resources in the account, which is one of the
Oh,
things
that's
that you
right. They
need to
actually
do.
told it, they saw the email and then they told it to
Yeah,
delete their account because we don't want to be billed anymore.
yeah,
Right.
yep.
But they were
But they had an active Amazon
server
FileMaker
running
server,
FileMaker, right?
correct?
And so it's
Yeah,
like,
and they clicked through all, I don't know, 7 of the warnings or whatever.
warnings. It's
Got
like, what
emails, all the you have like there's a mea culpa at the end that it's they make it hard, and people are
are you sure you want to delete this file, right? Are you really sure? The
be
dialog boxes
certain.
keep going and they said yes
Yeah,
to every damn button that said delete it, make it go away. And then they call us and hey, where'd it go? So
yeah.
in the book
They
we
had an
talk
old
about
backup, but
mm, mm,
you
mm.
know,
Yeah. And I was like, what do you do when someone does? I mean, to be honest with you, we've been doing this for how many years? I don't think that's only happened once, maybe twice ever. So it's pretty
one time, yeah,
rare
yeah,
because Amazon makes it, most businesses want to make it so you keep giving them money, but Amazon will shut it off if you're deliberate enough about shutting it off. But
yep.
you need to be really sure you know
The
where your
other one,
database is.
yeah, the other one that's good to know, if you don't pay your bill, which happens to one of our customers once a year, just
Mhm.
on a statistics basis, it's about that often. And it's usually like the card fully expires, or like somebody, they got all their cards hacked or whatever, and so they have to actually fully cycle and cancel and do that whole
All the
thing.
credit cards. Yep. Yep.
Correct. And so then the Amazon's not, it doesn't work anymore, whatever. So they ignore that. They love to ignore those emails, and then Amazon will, like 30 days after you don't pay, shut the stuff. And they don't fortunately, they don't
Delete it.
delete it. The funniest part, and I've learned this recently, so a lot of our customers, and I don't know what the part where they actually shut your server down for you, but they don't actually even immediately turn the server off. They cut the internet connection to it, which
Oh,
is an
okay.
excellent scream test, because if
Sure.
they're actively in FileMaker, it just dumps at some random time, and so I get an email that's like, why isn't FileMaker accessible? And I go try to log in. We set up a secondary account for our clients, and I go log in. And in that like billing failed type scenario, it has a specific error message for me,
Mhm.
that when I see that, I go, oh, they didn't pay their bill.
Yeah. Well.
And I'm like, hey, would you go check that your like card is current? And that's usually at the point where they're like, oh yeah, I got, whatever,
Mhm.
and they had to cycle all their cards or whatever. Like
Yeah.
that's the usual reason.
All right, anything else? Or are we going to pick this up tomorrow?
No,
I
pick
think
it
this
up with
is a
Linux tomorrow. Is there
Yeah.
any?
All
I
right,
don't see
everyone.
anything. So, thank
Cool.
you, everybody.
Tomorrow, more FileMaker Server shenanigans. We're going to set up EC2 tomorrow on Linux.